thank you for joining us today. If you are joining us at this fifth episode of the Fireside Chat, joining me today is, as always, Andrew Valkuskus, our favorite Viking expert on everything, who I love to pronounce his name wrong because it makes him smile.
Thank you so
And
much.
with us as well is the amazing Stephen Pearl, who is basically the writer of many books, and well, he's here to tell us all about that. Now, just to start off, though, Stephen, how you doing? It's been a while.
Well, I'm. Let's put it this way: if I was in the Viking era, I'd spend spring in the far north because of a strange curse that afflicted me and gave me a horrible malady. The trees started to bloom. Uh,
Spring allergies.
so yeah,
Tis the
seasonal
season.
allergies. Lilac, and my neighbor had planted about half dozen lilac trees on his property. So
Yikes. Yikes.
I'm okay. I'm okay. I won't do more than that.
In my neck of the woods, we've got nothing but pine trees, like fir trees, the white pines. And the last week, everything got dusted in this thick coating of yellow-green pine dust. Cars, windows, everything. Like, if you're out there, it's getting sucked into your laptop fan, into your electronics. It's crazy. So, yeah, just be maybe thankful that you're not there. That could have been a lot worse, probably.
Actually, pine trees don't bother me. It's just lilacs.
Okay.
But it's where, unfortunately, I just happen to live in that part of Canada where there's lots of lilacs.
Then you got to go in there and roll for initiative.
Mm.
See, in my part of Canada, we have a tree or two. I'm in a city though, so like,
Oh,
jokes aside, I'm actually in a pretty foresty area. But I'm sorry to hear that. It hasn't been bogging down any of your ongoing projects or anything, though, has it?
oh no, no, I can't let it stop you. Stop the work. The work is everything.
Work is life. All right. Well, so overall, actually, speaking of your projects, how have they been? Like, what have you been working on recently? How has the Children of Yoru been going?
Well, I haven't actually been involved with the Celtic project. Um, my bailiwick is the Bastard Prince saga, which starts with Horn of the Kraken, and will be coming out soon with the second installment, the Mistletoe Spear.
Mhm.
And yep, and I have about a third of Wolf's Son, which is the third book, done in rough drafts. And
Awesome.
I hope to have that done by the end of the year.
Can
And
poke you for a spoiler or two about it? I'm curious about the name.
well, Wolf's Son, if you remember Vidia, his family was massacred by the Crusaders in the first book. Well, not necessarily so.
Don't.
And
Hmm.
um, it would be a great military advantage to a unscrupulous leader to have Unifa in his forces. And Athelstan, as I paint him in the Bastard Prince saga, is, let's just put it, pragmatic about his victories.
Yeah,
So
he's
that's
a character that's been overlapped also in Michelle's stories, I believe, with Mindel. So it's going to be interesting to see the juxtaposition of both of your takes on Ethelstan. I haven't gotten to the point in Mindel's saga for that, but I do love your characterizations in the first two books.
yeah. Well, I mean, I do a lot more with Eric Bloodaxe than I do with the other leaders, but yeah, I kind of enjoyed that. It allowed me to kill a Carcon. and I don't particularly like that man, historically or what, however. But yeah, so Wolf's Son, it's on its surface the helping the deer redeem some part of his family. At a deeper level, it is an essential part of the war effort. So that's as much as I want to say about the third book, because obviously it's still in the rough draft stage, and it's going to undergo a lot of changes.
So it sounds like it's going to get more in global in scope, whereas like when we start out reading Horn of the Kraken gives kind of the hint at that greater conflict, but then you quickly zoom in on that lovable warband that gets hired for that Viking heist. And I absolutely love characterizing it as a Viking heist because, like, even when we go out on the shows and stuff, when I tell people, like, they're like, "What's this novel about?" I'm like, "It's a Viking heist." It's just all smiles on people's faces. They're really, and immediately, like, people are reading the back cover blurb.
Yeah, well, I think with role playing games, you look at the party and it's really a commando squad. And it doesn't matter which role playing game you're playing, they're a group of highly skilled individuals with complementary abilities that operate outside the circle of the major military forces. So, these are your Navy SEAL team that you send in to get Osama bin Laden. These are your elite, and they're also expendable. And, well, with Fjorn, you know that Queen Gedrin would actually like to see him expended. So I kind of like that relationship in so much as she actually kind of likes him, but, well, he is the bastard heir, and, get rid of them. They could cause problems.
Yeah, it's like Ocean's 11 meets Lord of the Rings is the vibe that I got from the first book, and that would be
Yep.
it carries into the second book, but like I said, the tone and nature changes, and I think you're going for that within your trilogy. So for those that haven't read Horn of the Kraken, what would be people tuning into the Twitch stream. What's the story all about? Like, what's the elevator pitch? Why someone either that isn't a gamer that would love to read this story, or someone who is a Fate of the Norns Ragnarok player would love to pull this into their adventures.
Um, Jarl Eric's Blood Axe ships are sinking at an alarming rate. And it is determined that Hakon, the false pretender to the throne of the Northlands, and Jarl Eric's bastard half-brother, has obtained a horn that summons Kraken from the depths to sink the ships. Well, Jarl Eric sends a group of heroes to infiltrate Hakon's compound and steal the horn. And as you said, Ocean's 11 meets Lord of the Rings. It's a Viking heist. And you get in there and you just have to figure out how you're going to do it. You got to case the joint. You got to circumvent the security systems. And I show one way of doing it in the novel, and I get, of course, with a novel, you get to do the real fun part, which is characterization and having the characters bicker and come to accommodations and work things out between themselves. And in the game, in the gaming module, well, you just have the adventure of how the heck are we going to do this? And you have the security that has to be circumvented. So how are you going to do that? And that's where you as a player get to figure it out.
Yeah, it was very much like a movie in terms of how everything came together, especially like when you go into that final scene, right? That's happening in Winchester. Through the streets and stuff. So, I mean, it is really, really well paced. And maybe that's a good segue to talk about like how you and James looked at these sagas. And I know originally we were looking at like one saga, but you know there's just so much action in that novel it turned into two sagas.
Well, I had, and
These two
full
bad
credit
boys.
to James. James did a marvelous job of taking it had good bones, but it was very crude, very rough that I gave him. And he made two excellent modules out of it. And I think it was an excellent collaboration between the two of us. And the doing that from the book, I'm a very fast-paced writer by nature. I take the advice that something must always be happening. You always have something happening. And as such, it would be murder to try to make a movie out of any of my books because what are you going to trim? So I wasn't surprised that it actually became two modules because there's also very much two story arcs in the book. Because the first story arc is the quest for the dead man's blade, the Niflheim or dagger, where during that quest they discover the Horn of the Kraken. Then you have the perfect break point when they meet, and I'm probably mutilating these names because I've read them, but I haven't heard them very often.
Mm-hmm.
But when they reach Alvalsade's, Jarl Eric's seat of power.
Alvaldsness.
Alvaldsness.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I was absolutely like a butcher when it came to the Gaelic stuff since we've been working on that. And several people can attest to the absolute mockery that I made of certain words. So don't feel bad about it. And wait till we get to our Mesoamerican mythologies. Oh boy, those are going to be doozies.
Those are interesting ones, too. Well, anyways, when they reach Jarl Eric's seat of power, that's when the transition happens and they actually start the quest for the horn. But it's also all the political background that's going on. There are spies. And spies, since early ancient Egypt, there have been spies. And in the Art of War out of China, it talks about spies. And so part of the issue is dealing with that. Who can you trust? And what can you trust? I have a friend, a great guy. I would trust him with my money.
Is he a spy?
Well, this is the point. I'd trust him with my money. I'd trust him with my life. I wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him with my wife.
I like the rhyme.
Okay?
Isn't that an old Norse proverb?
Could be. But, there is this thing of who can you trust in what situation? And with the Selkie character, Hala Seaborn, well, you can trust her as far as it will serve the Selkie, as far as it will serve Jarl Eric. Beyond that, you have to hold her suspect. And I've just given some of the stuff away for the gamers to watch for.
Oh, I was just about to say that she's actually an option in the sagas. So she's one of the fan favorites. When people came back to the booth after reading the novels, they were saying that, they really liked the character. And it kind of influenced how we ended up, James and I were talking, like, we gotta fit her in there. And so it's kind of like a spoiler. I'm trying to find the page with her in there so I can kind of flash it on the screen. But yeah, one of the fun characters that you want to have in your adventure.
And I will mention, she's back in Wolf's. She's back in Wolfson. So she was off doing her own thing during the Mistletoe Spear, but she's back for Wolfson.
That's great to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, I was very fond of her when I was writing her, and I was actually very pleased because in my initial rendition, she was a denizen.
Yeah, I remember we talked about it. You were like, "Well, how would we stat her? Like, what kind of powers would she have? How would it work within the Ragnarok universe?" And we had that back and forth. I remember early on in your writing of Horn of the Kraken.
Yeah, and it turns out if you go through the rule books, you can actually find enough aquatic powers to flesh her out. It's the creation matrix was. I actually put a creation matrix together for her when I was writing her, so I could get that straight in my head. And of course, I did a different take on the dual ability, and I like yours better. Actually, it fits better with the game, and it flows nicer. I was a little bit more D&D inspired for my initial version, which is why we've done some really nice collaboration on this.
Yeah, that's what I find is we get caught in a lot of these high fantasy tropes in our space, right? We're programmed by like the movies, the animes, the most common role playing games, video games, and they all kind of fall into these tropes. And the thing that kind of I think shakes us out of it is when we go back to that old source material, the old folk tales, the old mythologies, that really then put a new spin on the fantasy genre, or the
New.
Yes, new. We've come full circle.
A new perspective, maybe?
Yeah. It basically jogs us out of this, where everyone's kind of re-spewing each other's points, and we've kind of gotten this vanilla high fantasy universe.
Yeah, the stagnation. Right?
Yeah, it kind of takes us back to this old version of the Brothers Grimm, right? Not the sanitized version of the stories, but the old ones. And I always worry, with like the PC movement these days, and the kind of things that people might end up raising a flag over, because we do tap into some old tales that do have some grim and some disturbing elements in them. But it's fun because it shocks some people a little bit out of their usual, like, I know what to expect here. It's a fantasy universe, and then wait, you've thrown a curveball here.
Yeah, well, the honest truth is, okay, one example, the Norse had slavery, and because they're the peoples who they could subjugate. But also, I do a thing with that where one of the slaves in the second book, in the Mistletoe Spear, she's been almost taken on like a daughter by Fjorn's father, and it's the sort of thing that, yes, there were. Okay, you can't really use the term good master. Slavery is a reprehensible institution.
But we can't really deny it happened. It was part of the culture at that point in time. Right?
We can't whitewash history, because for the history of humanity, we've had slavery longer than we've had no slaves, right? If you look back thousands and thousands of years, it's kind of ingrained in human DNA, unfortunately. And now we're finally in this enlightened onto how wrong it is. So, we're kind of navigating this in a very nascent period, right? It's still a transitional period. So, but we're handling it with all these sensitivities.
Yeah, exactly. And like I
Yeah.
feel we're rather tactful when it comes to that stuff, like just in general. But like
Yeah.
it's just like ignoring our history is not going to help us learn from it, you know? And so
Right.
like that's definitely something that like what I like about a lot of the games, especially the Fate and the North stuff, is it's a lot historical. It's a lot, you know, very accurate when it comes to like a lot of the myths and such. And so it's kind of like learning at the same time because like I learned a lot about Norse mythology since I knew a good amount when I started playing, but now I know a good amount. Like when my friends actually have a Norse mythology question, they actually come to me and stuff. So it's pretty funny. So
I had
sorry to cut you off though.
that's okay. Well, I'm just going to sum up. One thing I always say is the only reason anybody ever wants you to forget something is so they can do it to you again.
Agreed. Yeah.
And well, I had the advantage coming into writing Horn of the Kraken that I was in the SCA, Society for Creative Anachronism, for 9 years. So while I have a layer of rust about an inch thick.
So for those who don't know, because Stephen, we've got like a wide audience, maybe you can enlighten the group. Yeah. For the SCA.
Okay. I know how to fight with a broadsword and shield. I know how to fight with a broadsword, no shield. I also happen to have fenced, and I was fairly good at one point with saber and epee. So coming into it, I brought that to the battle scenes. And also I've had the experience of being in a shield wall and watching 500 men charge towards me with pole arms and battle axes.
500. That's got to be terrifying when just hearing or feeling the ground.
That's Pennsic War, and it's weird because you know you're playing. You know that you are you're in some minor danger, but it's like being hit with a baseball bat, being hit with one of the rattan swords that are used in the SCA. I don't fight live steel. I never have. I never will. Swords are meant to kill people.
I think that's HEMA if you go to the metal swords, right? I think it's
technically
group.
a live steel made not to kill people, but that's besides the point. I've done it before. It's actually really fun.
Killing people?
Huh? No, I've never killed anyone outside of LARPs. But I've done a little bit of what do you call it? Like a teeny tiny bit of brew hurt. I got to use a metal sword before, and it's just kind of like a blunt blade that like I was wearing a gauntlet when I first went there, and they hit me in the hand. I didn't feel a thing. And like I was super excited when they hit me because I'm like, do it again, because like I don't know, I got adrenaline from that. But that sounds super exciting. So like, how many years of that did you do?
About 9.
About 9. Damn.
Yeah.
I'd love to have a spar sometime when we meet.
Well, my knees are kind of saying no nowadays, but I have the background, and like I said, it's play acting, but boy, it hits something primal in you. And I'm not the only guy to say this. You get taken back to that age when you see that charge towards you. And you are going, oh shit, I am going to die.
Because shield wall, you are right in the front. Those first pointy metal objects are coming through your body before they're hitting anyone behind you.
Yep. And in the SCA, kings are chosen by right of combat. And I happen to know the king of the East who was on the opposite side. And who do you think ended up right in front of me? This guy is one of the best fighters in the entire group. And here I am. I'm okay, but not at his level. And it's sort of, okay.
Did you do the old, hey, look over there?
Works every day.
Your shoelaces are tied. Or untied.
Yeah. Well, misdirection works, but the nice thing is I can bring that to it. So when I write a battle scene, there's a little bit more realism to it. When I write somebody, like one thing I will never write is one person taking on 4 people in an open field. Because you cannot effectively defend your back.
Yeah, we know how that ends
If they
in
can
many
encircle you,
Icelandic sagas. They didn't sugarcoat it. When
yeah,
someone was outnumbered on horseback or whatever out in Iceland's open fields, it was it was curtains.
yep. And the only way you have one man taking on a big crowd is a Horatio on the bridge situation.
Mm-hmm. A berserker on the bridge.
Yes. Well, I always kind of felt that the Norse had a very effective way of dealing with their dangerous mentally ill. Push them to the front. If you're going to pole vault over a group of Roman legionnaires with your spear, and then lay into everything around you, odds are you're not coming back.
Probably not.
Well, there was a reason why Constantinople ended up using Vikings. The Emperor of Constantinople ended up using Vikings as his personal bodyguards, the Varangian Guard. Those guys were working on a completely other level.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, you can't argue the fact that the Norse produced some of the finest warriors of their age. And I tried to reflect that as well by my characters. You can call it lucky. I like to call it skill. It comes out a little bit more in the second book with the Stello character.
Yep.
Mjolnir, who has some interesting things with him.
So we're getting some questions from chat, but before we get to those questions, now when you're jumping into your second novel, how about we do a elevator pitch again for your second novel, The Mistletoe Spear, for, again, those that would be gamers or non-gamers. Why would they jump into now the second book, which I've read and I've loved?
Bjorn and his party are conscripted once more by Jarl Eric Bloodaxe to recover a artifact of massive power that would guarantee victory to whoever holds it. But they must face the forces of Athelstan, as he too is seeking out that artifact. And they will find themselves, can even can even the magic of the Norse, magic and courage of the Norse prevail when crusaders and trolls align themselves against them?
Bum, bum, bum. We need that sound effect. Aaron, we got to add that to our podcast.
Okay. I'll get on that, boss.
All right. And the Mistletoe Spear, a very interesting route. It has to do with Balder and Odin and Loki and Hod. I don't know if you want to get into that a little bit.
Actually, I do include a bardic dissertation that covers the myth in the book as just part of the everyday establishing life. Because Fjorn's only been back home for about 2 weeks. And a lot has happened in that 2 weeks. And then there is one part of the book that it's full-on war. And I like to think I don't pull any punches on it, because war has always been horrific. And it's not the great adventure. It's a full-on war, and the party finds himself in the middle of it. A commando squad separate from the forces that are fighting, but still pitching in to do their bit. And there are trolls, and there are druids, and there are crusaders, and it's fun.
And so, out of curiosity, do you write that from like the individual's point of view, or do you write this from like a bird eye view, in the sense of like, this is what they Just like to give them kind of a gist of like what your writing style when it comes to war is, because I've seen a
Mostly
few
from
different
the
people.
individual point of view.
Okay.
There are some comments about major troop movements, but for the most part, it's from the ground view of the party members.
So you're right there in the thick of it with them. I like
You're
that.
right
Okay.
there in the thick of it. You've got blood spatter. You have uh, black black skeleton trolls, which I riffed a little bit on your work, Andrew, on that one because um, I took it from the idea that you could designate a spirit to empower your black skeleton from. Oh, I am so sorry.
The Scythe Kona. Yeah, so what
Yeah.
you and Chris did with the Scythe Kona, what I absolutely adored. This is mentioning Chris because he wrote Scythe and Sword around the same time that
That was it.
Steven ended up writing Horn of the Kraken. And both of them ended up using a Scythe Kona, which is one of the archetypes in the Ragnarok universe, which is a witch, a sorceress that deals with the unseen world of spirits. And you know, an RPG can only go so far in characterizing an archetype or a character, but you know, hats off to both you and Chris in terms of you guys took it to the next level where these Scythe Konas were dealing with, you know, their ancestor spirits, their friend spirits that were haunting them, and they're having conversations with them, and it just became like almost a cabal of undead retinue that they were like conversing with and traveling with throughout the novels. And I thought that just made that archetype soar, absolutely soar after those two novels.
Yeah, well, I mean, Sigerlina's conversations mostly consist of, "Why don't you go away and leave me alone?" she, she's this really pretty, honey blonde 15-year-old, very sweet person by nature, and she has the ability to summon the dead to fight for her. And also, one thing I'm going to toot my own horn a little here. I like the thing that I did in the Mistletoe Spear, where being summoned by a Seth Kona to be a black skeleton actually gives you a second chance to win your way into Valhalla.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because it always seemed kind of, no offense, but it seemed kind of exploitive of the spirit. Oh, you'll fight for me, get killed again, and then you just wander off. But by doing it this way, I could add this real positive spin to it, and it sort of lightened the whole Seth Kona thing a little bit for me.
And when I looked at that, it made me kind of revisit my thought process about the afterlife mechanics as well. So this is where I really love working with authors of novels and fans. I think it's a whole cyclical thing where we kind of like take an idea and we incubate it, and everyone kind of throws their thought process on that, and in the end we end up with something a lot nicer coming out of the other end.
So, just like to out of curiosity here, so does that mean like that's kind of like setting a canon in the sense that like when you do pull a soul, it's never from anywhere else, it's typically from hell, or like
It's a lost soul. It's always been a lost soul, right?
Okay,
One that
okay.
couldn't get into
Yeah.
Valhalla or one of the other heavens.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
That's actually
basically,
really cool. I like
it's,
that a lot. Like just the idea, the aesthetic, especially the second chance thing. I like that a lot because then you would have people volunteering to essentially come back. You know, it's like take me, use me, like please. So it's like that's
yeah. Well, I looked at it. You can have a lot of courageous people who would fight to the end, given the opportunity, but they got knocked out in combat and find themselves in chains. And there's nothing they can do. They cannot have the hero's death, even though they are of the hero's nature.
it was taken from
And
them.
I wanted to put a spin on that.
I like that a lot.
We had a really funny situation in the previous edition prior to Ragnarok, where it's just Fate of the Norns, and we didn't have the runes. It was just like a percentile system, and we had two players. One of them that was he would burn all of his, we'll call it XP, which would give you a chance to get into the afterlife to improve his character, and then whatever was left over is if you died, that was your percent chance to get in the heavens. And so he would just burn whatever XP he had, and then we'd get like 5%. He'd roll 4, and he'd get into the heavens. And the other guy in the party would just be like, I'm not improving my character. I want to like get my guy into Valhalla, and he'd get like a 95% chance because he's just storing all of his XP, and he rolls a 96. And this was just repeated time after time after time with this guy. That one time we ended up having an adventure in Niflheim, the realm of the dead. And we ended up meeting all of that guy's characters. He had the worst luck. So
Same table.
Exactly. They all appeared in Niflheim.
Like rubbing the salt in though. That's literally like, hey, remember all these failures right here on display? It's like,
but yeah, so he was like, can I get some XPs to help you guys out and give me a chance there? So. As we're talking about this, this was kind of like something that had come up in the 90s. This was like mid 90s. So, maybe it's like we were tone deaf to that player, and now's the time to bring that into the system.
In before playable archetype for black skeletons.
Yes. So, do we want to field some questions, Aaron? I saw some go by.
Yeah. Well, you've already basically kind of jumped around here, but actually, here's something I'm curious about. How'd you guys meet? I know Andrew has a bad habit of just collecting writers wherever he goes, but how'd you guys meet?
Yeah, it was at not Fan Expo, but the mini Fan Expo in Toronto. Was it the spring or the fall one?
I thought it was Fan Expo.
No, it was the mini Fan Expo because we were in the main room.
Oh, was it the Comic-Con where we were right next to each other?
Yes, yeah.
It was the Comic-Con because I remember. Yeah, I had a bunch of authors. Horror was like a. Were you with a bunch of horror people too? Like authors dressed up in goth. Okay.
I had my own table at that one.
Because I think we had.
I think we've been at another con where I was with the horror writers.
Because we had been, I think, in close proximity for maybe a couple of cons before we ended up striking up a conversation. I think it was your wife that kind of really ended up sparking the idea of a collab. Because I remember her at our booth at one of the cons, and she was going, Steven's a big fan of Vikings. He loves mythology, especially like Egyptian mythology. Huge nerd on that. You know your stuff inside and out. You guys should talk. And I remember after that, you and I ended up going down the rabbit hole after a couple of drinks, and next thing we know, we're talking about novels and sagas and all kinds of crazy adventures. But it was Toronto, no?
Yeah, well, mutual, common interests and mutual benefit. Best foundation for a relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah, we were right next to each other, I think, at one of the cons. And I think it was the Comic-Con, because you were telling me a funny story where they had screwed up the real estate space on the tables at that con, and someone wasn't getting their 30 inches or whatever it was, ridiculous sub-parceling of a table. And you were telling me that these organizers had been doing that, they had been dropping the ball on that all the time, and just letting all the exhibitors fight it out over, I've got my 24 inches on this table or whatever. And
it was... I know who the culprits for that situation were, and I just settled it for myself by having a tape measure, and I measured out the exact length. And if anybody said anything, here, you can measure mine. You want to complain, talk to the person on the other side until you find the one that did it.
Yeah, and I remember Yeah, and I remember telling you, you had more books than I did at that point. I think I only had 2 books. I had Fafnir's Treasure and Core Rulebook at that point. I didn't have, I think, Denizens of the North yet, maybe. And I was just like, yeah.
No, Denizens came
Whatever
out.
space you need, we're good.
Yeah, yeah. Denizens came out while I was writing, just as I started writing Horn of the Kraken,
Okay.
because it was one of the ones that I drew from. And I remember you. I remember you saying, "Why did I only use the player
The
player
core rulebook?
characters from the core rulebook?" And I said, "Well, you don't want to have too many characters at the start, so that you have time for people to invest in them. And the idea is that later I'll start bringing in the other character archetypes."
Yep.
And I actually kept my word on that. You have the Sebo and the druids making appearances in Mistletoe Spear.
Oh, so can I assume that Lords of the Ash archetypes will be in the Wolf's Son, or what was the working title for the third one?
Wolf's Son.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm extra excited if we're expanding the repertoire.
Well, I'll have to get the Lord of the Ash books so that I can bring up an archetype or two. I do have a couple of interesting villains, actually. You had one of the archetypes that's basically an assassin.
The Shedugingen that everyone has a hard time pronouncing.
Yeah.
The Shidugigi.
I have one of those that's making an appearance in Wolf's Son and is going to escalate as the storyline continues. And he's partnered with a Sethkona who is not the nice Sethkona that I have dealt with up till this point. This one is far more the witch that your mother warned you about. But I'm actually playing with a lot of the more dark aspects that you've come up with. In Wolf's Son, I touch on the snake shriekers, that are thus far as I know, isolated to Iceland.
Yeah, the race Skrelvers. Like I even have a hard time pronouncing that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've actually, I think, toned down the dark as the books went on, and it's just because Fafnir's Treasure was, everything in its glory just right on the pages. And I remember one Amazon review that said Fafnir's Treasure makes Deadwood look like Candyland, and I laughed and laughed and laughed at that review. It's still there, I think, and the more conventions I attended, the more demo games I ran for teens and even younger kids at the table. And the more of those games that I ran, the more I self-censored these adventures, on the fly. So Astrid's House of Pleasure became Astrid's House of Board Games. And, every adult at the table is like, I got you. Yeah. And so, but, as it was going on, I was just like, so the books did end up getting more and more. If any of the dark stuff was there, it was kind of put more into nuance and let your imagination carry you the rest of the way. Whereas I found the early stuff was very much in your face.
I tend to write on the dark side of things anyways. And it's one of the things I liked actually about Fafnir's Treasure was it wasn't pulling punches. And yeah, prostitution has existed. And well, Horn of the Kraken again. I have the bathhouse. That is the conduit for them to getting in and casing the city. And again, that was very much what a lot of the Roman baths were.
And Hollywood would have used that angle to get the Ocean's 11 team into the casino as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, I actually, one of the things I really enjoyed with Horn of the Kraken, I, for whatever bizarre reason, have something of a fascination with sewage treatment. And
you and Ed, actually. Ed talks a lot about Athcliath. Now that we're talking about the city, there is so much talk where we talk about, how do the privies get emptied, the night soil wagons, how do the pipes get, is there a sewer system? No, because the Liffey is tidal, right? You're too close to the ocean. And so, yeah, I think both of you are on the same wavelength when it comes to the latrines. We should have a latrine splat book.
It's that authenticity, right?
Oh, and I see
Michelle. Make sure your shit is real.
And I see Michelle thinks both Stephen and Ed should do Ragnarok After Dark splat book as well.
Oh yeah, that's a good censorship right there.
That's the way I operate.
Yep, it's it's something that everybody glosses over, but it's absolutely essential if you're going to have towns and cities and so forth. What do you do with the waste?
Yep,
and
it's important.
Yeah, and nobody wants to muck about through the wagon that's carrying the waste.
And I love the fact that we haven't gone to sewers with Athcliath. So for me, again, I fell into that fantasy trope, and the first time I ran Athcliath for the team, like my weekly group, and they were like, we need to get some contraband in and out of the city, I went sewers. And then right after that, I'm like, I got to check with Ed. Are there sewers? And then, when I messaged him, he's like, well, let me check if there's sewers. And so we went down that whole rabbit hole. But the fact that there are no sewers takes us out of this entire high fantasy trope that we're talking about of adventures under city. There is no sewer. So now, how do you handle that, under city black market subterfuge without that architecture? And that becomes a lot more of, you need to think outside the box. What are they using? And so what we ended up falling to is now you have a network of shapeshifters that shapeshift into owls and other things that fly over the walls to bring the contraband in and out. So
that works. Yeah, one of the things that I'm going to try very hard to work in, because I mentioned that they have a spoon they use after they defecate to scrape themselves clean. And this is what Fjorn and his people are used to. Well, one of the things that I want to try to touch on is that in Jorvik, they didn't use the spoon, at least not when they weren't on ship. They had a particular moss that they collected.
As long as it wasn't mixed with poison ivy or poison oak.
Yeah, when you're down to pine cones, you've got a problem.
I have to know, did they share this spoon, or is it like an individual? Each one had their own spoon.
You'll have to get the
Traditionally, each Norseman had a little, you could call it a toiletry kit, and his spoon would be in that. I have it. I played a little fast and loose with it, and I had a spoon, and a pot of water that it would be put in between uses.
Makes sense.
But
Today I learned butt spoons. It's like...
And what if it's an Orlog with shapeshifting? Orlogs are the mimics of Ragnarok.
You do not want an Orlog giving you butt spoons because you're gonna get weird things going on there.
Yeah, Stephen, I have to send you Lords of the Ash. Orlogs are the humans that ended up. Okay, so let's take a step back. So the gods and the Jotuns during the time of creation, at the very beginning of time, used void magic, the magic that came from Ginnungagap, to create the dwarves, the cosmos, the world from Ymir's corpse. And they also fought Nidhogg, which was an Alsvarter, which was a primordial being that predated time, predated the Aesir gods and the Jotuns. And there was a great war between the Alsvarter and the Muspelli Jotuns, which are the fire giants. So, at the very beginning of time, the realm of fire and the realm of death and ice, Niflheim, crashed together. And this is where the crucible of life springs eternal, right? And so there was a battle between them, and most of the Alsvarter were exiled into Ginnungagap. And Nidhogg, in his passion to be reunited with his kin, basically blights and poisons and curses void magic. And every time it is used, it builds a little bit of a bridge in the void to bring his kin back into the universe. And the gods and the giants united together to fight Nidhogg. The best they can do is imprison him in Vergelmir. And this is all of the divine forces united against Nidhogg. And so they realized that we got to just have a truce and say we will never use void magic again. So this is why creation stops. The divine races stop creating new beings, new realms, all of that stuff, because Nidhogg has poisoned the creation magic, which is Ginnungagap. And so what you have is obviously mankind. We are just like just a super special specimen and special short bus specimen. And so you've got the Orlogs, which are an archetype that go, void magic? Ooh, do tell me more. Oh, I don't care if the giants and the gods don't use it. Let me dabble a little bit and see where this takes me. And so this is an archetype that I know is close to Aaron's heart. And it's in Lords of the Ash. And so these are humans that just basically, where the gods and the giants, they hate each other, but they've come to a truce of no void magic, because there will be more than one Nidhogg that we have to deal with. The humans, known as the Orlog, will tap into void magic to create all manner of monstrosity. So they're using that creation magic, and they're mortal, so they don't have the same level of control as the divine races. So they are just an absolutely fun archetype in Lords of the Ash.
The best, in my opinion. I might be
Dabblers.
biased though. It's like,
Well, you like Nightmare Fuel, right? Hashtag
I love Nightmare Fuel. And I mean, like, if I could talk about my favorite nightmare I ever created, which Andrew already knows what I'm going to talk about, is one of the first things I created with this, for example, is a little monster that looked like a hand. Now, their whole thing is they would go into graveyards and they would find other hands and then eat the rest of the corpse. And then they would essentially get that hand to join their other swarm of hands. And so then you would basically end up with a little army of hands going around picking people off the ground and dropping them on their feet because they don't like feet. And just, over and over again until basically they get more hands. And that was their entire species. And he created it because he needed a hand. I love Orlogs so much.
I forgot the whole mythos of the hand swarm hates the foot swarm.
Exactly. The foot swarm no longer existed. They already defeated the Foot Clan.
Oh my
Ninja
god!
Turtle reference intentional.
Yes, that was so funny. That was some good times.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, it sounds like an exaggerated version of people who play with Ouija boards. To be honest with you.
Yeah, except you kind of create monstrosities that should never existed in the first place.
I stand by my statement.
And like at a certain point, when they create something, at a certain point they go, "Screw you, Dad or Mom," it's be generally here, and then they just kind of fuck off into the world and then begin to procreate, and then it's just kind of like, cool, I've just let that nightmare out into the world. I hope it doesn't ruin anything. But
But they
okay,
don't.
no, of course not.
Of course not. They're like,
I'll stop.
my child has flown the coop. Or
Yes.
crawled out of the
So
coop.
proud, so proud. I have like a full list of creatures I made for that back in the day. Orlogs are so much fun. Okay, I'll stop. I'm done gushing. Okay, I'm sorry, guys.
Oh, no, that's the part of the fun of role playing gaming.
So I guess the next question is,
Yes, the next question is.
well, when we're looking at the Mistletoe Spear, is this going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 sagas? What are we envisioning here as a?
I think that,
What comes after it?
well, the Bastard Prince saga, I envision as either 4 or 5 books. The reason that I might do 5, with your permission, is that at
I
the
won't
end
say
of
no.
4,
Keep them coming.
okay. At the end of 4, they rekindle the new sun.
Oh,
And-
nice. Okay, so you're going in like end of Fimbulwinter at this point. So
Okay.
for those
Yeah.
watching, okay, this is why I'm geeking out here. So Fimbulwinter is the first age of Ragnarok, where 2 celestial wolves go and devour the sun and the moon. And if you can imagine now, picture a world with no sun and moon. Everything's a balmy minus 40. All fresh bodies of water are frozen over. Ice skating, no fishing. All the animals are being hunted to extinction. You're living on the coast for that minus 40 balmy weather. And someone's working to try and get another sun into the firmament, right? So it's been done before. It'll be done again. And in Denizens of the North, we have like an adventure that the Norns could have the players come up with a reforging of the new sun, because in the prophecies of Ragnarok in the Voluspa, it says the Fimbulwinter will last 3 years. And so that intones that there's going to be some sort of end to Fimbulwinter, but Ragnarok's still not over. And so either the players do it or someone else does it, right? So we've got it within the lore that maybe the Dvergar do it, or the fire giants, the Muspelli Jotuns do it. But yeah, if you're tapping into this in the novel series, I am like 2 thumbs up. That's like a very, very cool take on, like doing a deep dive on one of the big elements of the Ragnarok life cycle.
I'm glad you approved, because it's just sort of, it's how I envisioned, and I don't want to give too much away about the 4th book because it's still up here.
Yep.
But the reason that there might be a 5th book is I would want to explore the aftermath of the end of Fimbulwinter, because it's not all hearts and flowers.
So my suggestion is you don't want to go the route of Robert Jordan, who went like from a tight trilogy to world building for 14 books. That guy was an absolute like maniac. He
No,
Which books?
no, it would not.
Wheel
it
of
would
Time?
not be beyond
Oh,
5.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, Wheel of Time. So like he was better served to go like, I'm going to wrap up this trilogy and I'm going to write another trilogy that like follows it, and then another trilogy. But he went from I've written 2 books of a trilogy which are really tight and fun, and then I'm like, oh wait, I think I'm going to start world building. And like, please, Stephen, don't do that. Like,
No,
yeah,
no.
have like
Like
a good complete story arc, and then we can keep doing back-to-back trilogies, and that's going to be amazing. Or quadrologies or quintologies, but
Yeah. Well, I have enough other work. Like the thing that I'm right now, the reason I'm taking a respite from Wolf's Son is that I've pretty much already contracted the 3rd book in the Freedom Saga, Cloning Freedom, Freedom's Law, which is coming out in December, and hopefully Freedom's Myth the year after that. So I'm juggling 2 or 3 series, and it's just I've got this full form idea of where the Bastard Prince was going, and it's just a matter of slotting everything into place. But if there is a fifth book, and there's no guarantee that there will be, because the fourth really does wrap things up, but it would be an exploration of the havoc that is released when the sun is back in the sky. And, okay, the rivers of the capital city start melting, and they're covered with shantytowns. All the sewage and waste that has accumulated in the frozen rivers is sweeping out to sea. And the image I have is them coming in on the Appin Het, and it's like sailing through
That's the ship.
an open sewer.
Yep. And
Yeah.
the thing in the Second Age is Fenrir is free. And so is Jormungand, the Midgard serpent. So if you can think of Sermungand at this point, like, he's going to be like, what is all this sewage in my, swimming pool?
Yes.
He's already, like, prophesied to create a ton of tidal waves that are going to take out all these coastal towns that have been formed during the first age of Ragnarok. And there are 4 ages of Ragnarok, spoiler.
Yeah.
And so the third age is going to be built upon the War of Shadow, which is in the works. Mm-hmm.
One day.
Yes, one day. One day. Oh my God, one day. Oh dear God, one day.
Yeah.
I'm never gonna let that go, Andrew.
I think we're both at that age where we start saying, okay, am I going to live long enough to do all this stuff?
Yeah, it's hilarious because my wife's family, they're always like, so Andrew, you've been doing this for like 10 years or more? Have you run out of ideas? I'm like, I've probably knocked out 2% of all of my ideas that I want to deliver to market. If I could clone myself, we can get a ton more of this stuff out. So come on, Elon Musk, let's start that cloning company. Let's get going.
Vikings on Mars.
Yeah.
No, but I'm definitely looking forward to your next stuff, Stephen. Like, it's absolute gold. Like, I've loved the novels, I love the adventures. I can tell you, it's more than just me. The people that come to the booths, they've bought them, they've played them, they've read them, and the proof is in the pudding. People come back and they're like, "Where's the next installment?"
That's really good to hear. That is really, really good to hear. And well, you have the original rough draft of Troublesome Trolls, and I'll be getting on to the rough draft for the Mistletoe Spear module probably in the next couple of months.
Perfect. So we've got a Kickstarter coming up, right? Which is going to be the Mega Viking Anthology. And I know Aaron's favorite question is, what is your favorite? You go ask.
Sorry, what was that, Andrew? You were going to ask my question for me, so go ahead.
He's asked the last 3 people on the podcast, what is your favorite part of the Mega Viking Anthology? Because we have so much stuff in the Viking Mega Anthology. Where we have your novels, we have Michelle's novels, we have Ed's novels, we have 2 graphic novels. Well, we have a graphic novel and a comic book. We have a box set of a city. Like, there's so much stuff, and there's stretch goals, which I try not to talk about because, knowing me, we're going to front load them all, and then we're going to be like in chat going, "Oh my God, we need more stretch goals because I've given them all up in the first $1,000 or $2,000 extra." And so, someone locked me out of the Kickstarter after it launches, please.
And on that same point, what is your favorite part? But also, what is the favorite part you haven't personally written as well? So far, that you're most excited for?
Well, I honestly haven't read the material yet.
Okay, but like, when you have an idea of what
I happen to be a fan of Ed Greenwood's writing.
Of course.
So I think Ed is quite brilliant, and so I'll say his book.
The One-Eyed King. Yep, read it, love it, and just gonna rub it in all your faces because I know you guys haven't read it. Blah blah blah.
I've actually been reading a bit of the Adventures of Mindle, and it's been pretty good. I'm not too far in. I'm like maybe about 5-6 pages in, but I've been very much enjoying it. It's very Pratchett. Like honestly, I very much get those vibes. So it's been pretty good. So what's your favorite though you've worked on so far though, Stephen?
Oh, my favorite Fate of the Norns project.
Yeah.
Right now it's Wolfson, which is a bit of a cop out, but
Okay.
it's the thing of you get very emotionally invested when you are in a project.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. If Aaron asked me the same thing, I'd be like, yeah, War of Shadow, because I'm like, I'm in it. Yes.
Me too, Andrew. Me too. So, all right. Well, then my follow-up to that is, what comes after Mistletoe Spear? I mean, would it be the Wolf Son at this point, or would it be something else?
It will be Wolfson.
Okay.
The first, well, actually, all of the books are, the basic format is highly, we must get the blank to keep it away from the invading Crusaders.
The Heist Formula.
And, yeah, the Heist Formula.
It's a winning formula.
And, yeah, and you have, with Wolf's Son, you're getting the young Ulnefer, because you do not, number one, you want to rescue them for obvious reasons. Number two, you do not want that power falling into the hands of your enemy. And there's a few other rescues that go along with that, because there's more or less if we were doing a James Bond film, it would be the evil scientist secret research facility. But
so Fjorn, do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Fjorn, I expect you to die.
Just about.
Please to cut you in half with a long ship or something. I'm just like,
Yes.
slowly try to cut you in half with a long ship. My bad.
We can get that in the YouTube video, right? We can get that James Bond laser. Yes, lasers.
Yeah.
Sharks with lasers. Yeah, excellent.
That's the next Orlog creation. It's basically shark lasers. It's like, or laser sharks. Sharks made of laser.
Sharknadoes.
Sharknado lasers.
Yeah. Well, when you add magic to the mix, you can have many things.
Well, that kind of taps out most of my questions, though I don't know about this one here. It says here, will there be a saga? Hint stretch goal. Andrew, could you help me decipher this a bit?
Yeah, so there will be sagas for each one of the novels. That's what we want to do.
Including the Mistletoe Spear?
Including the Mistletoe Spear, including the Misadventures of Mindle, including...
Oh, okay, so like everything's going to have its own
One-Eyed King. But the One-Eyed King is the only one that is officially announced, which is the box set, which is Athcliath. That is the really large saga. Saga. It's absolutely massive. The rest of this is stretch goals. So spread the word. Get everyone like hyped up for the Kickstarter, because the more backers there are, the more sagas we're going to putting out for every single one of these novels. Yes.
And the more work you're giving yourselves.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, lock me out.
Aren't you already locked up? Hello, COVID. But you shouldn't be leaving your basement, Andrew. Come on now. Well, I think that's it for tonight. But for for those of you who have joined us, thank you so much. And for those of you watching this in the future, thank you for watching. So
Excellent. Subscribe, like our channel. We will have many other very talented people like Steven to chat with, and hopefully we can get a big round circle of amazing, like, talented people talking. Like, we'll do panels. We'll do panel types stuff.
I think it would be great.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, and you okay. Well, sounds good. Well, take care, guys.
Take care.
Good night.